Hi, I'm Emily Hawthorne. I'm a Middle East analyst at Stratfor.
And I'm Ryan Bohl, another Middle East analyst here over at Stratfor.
And we wanted to talk a little bit about a couple visits to the Middle East by U.S. administration officials. We have ongoing Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's visit to the Middle East region, 9 different countries, mostly Arab states. And that comes on the heels shortly after National Security Advisor John Bolton's visit to Israel and Turkey. And what really is the purpose of this visit? We have seen an effort by U.S. administration officials to try and reassure U.S. allies in the Middle East in the wake of President Trump's announcement in December that the U.S. is withdrawing troops from Syria. And what we had in Cairo during this visit was a speech by Mike Pompeo outlining the broad objectives that the U.S. is trying to fulfill in the Middle East. Those include being a force for good that includes humanitarian aid, stabilization, working on counterterrorism initiatives, trying to contain Iran in the region, as well as pulling together a strategic network of allies in the region. But pulling together allies in the region is harder than it seems.
Yeah, that's right. And that last point, the Middle Eastern Strategic Alliance, is something that we've been tracking and watching a lot here at Stratfor because it's billed often as the Arab NATO. And it's something that is a multi-decade project with the Americans. It's something that goes all the way back to when it became a great power after the Second World War. The idea is put together all of your allies into one institution that would be able to secure American interests and, more importantly, ward off the encroachments from other great powers like these days, China and Russia. But unfortunately, as the United States attempts to put this together, divergent interests exist within its network of allies. And that makes it so that it's very hard to put together the equivalent of an Arab NATO that would be able to do both what the Americans want, which is to ward off external influence from these other great power extra-regional competitors, and also to secure the region so the United States can deploy its power to the more geopolitically significant regions of Europe and Asia. And of course, one of those biggest holes is Iran, which, as we know, is something that remains a key problem in their strategy. Yeah,
so the question on how to contain Iran, how to work to impede the Iranian government's actions in the region, this is a really strong priority for the U.S. government in the Middle East. But what's interesting about it is, in a couple of ways, it's not viewed as a priority in the same level, both by U.S. allies and by some members of the administration, including the president himself. With respect to the allies in the region, Mike Pompeo made this rather prominent speech from Cairo. Egypt doesn't view the Iran threat in the same way that Israel views the Iran threat, or the same way that the Gulf states view the Iran threat. So this is something, when you're trying to pull these states together to be a joint force working against Iranian interests in the region, that's a problem. There's a fault line there that they don't view it in the same way. And then the other side of that coin, and this has especially been put into question by the announcement of the U.S. withdrawal, is, are we going to use Syria as a theater in which to push back against Iranian influence? This was a priority that was put into the national security strategy more prominently over the last couple of years, but now there's this question of whether or not there still is this enduring commitment to that. And there are other divergences as well.
Yeah, that's right. And there's other things beyond just the Russia-China-Iran component. There's also the fact that these states all want to diversify their relationships. They all want to find backups for the United States. Because over the past couple of decades, what the United States' geopolitical behavior in the region would be was relatively predictable. These states could more or less guess what the Americans would do and what the red lines were. But since the Arab Spring, since the Iran nuclear deal, since a series of events, these states can no longer read the Americans as cleanly as they were able to in the 1990s and early 2000s. And so they're looking for other partners, both economic and security. And that means reaching out to the other great powers out there, which is Russia and China. So even if you can convince a group as diverse as Egypt, Turkey, and the Gulf states to come together in a formal alliance, it's very hard to get them to. It's very hard to convince them that they should forego the benefits that they would get from having other relationships with other great powers who aren't necessarily trying to encroach and take over their territory or take over their political systems the way that it worked out in the Cold War. And so that remains another key challenge going forward for this administration.
So we have the priorities laid out, and we have these reassurance trips happening, but there still are so many barriers to come.
That's right.
And for more on U.S. Middle East priorities and for other topics, please visit worldview.stratfor.com.